You're listening to a channel descent into identity. Welcome to Truth of You on YouTube, and this is a very special episode that was first featured on our podcast, Resonant Truth. This is a channeled transmission where we explore deep questions beyond the conscious mind to explore the true nature of identity, its multidimensional origins, its entanglement with fear, memory, and survival. This is a deep dismantling. This is profundity delivered raw. This is discombobulating. And how did we even arrive at this? Daniel, welcome, I guess, you and your higher self, both to Resonant Truth and this episode. Could you share more about, when I say this is a transmission, what does that actually mean? How did we arrive at this raw content?
If you know us and anything about our history, exploring past lives is something that plays an integral role. And so through this, we discovered quantum healing hypnosis technique, a technique of hypnosis to be able to access past lives in our higher self. And after a session brought us together, we felt the pull to become practitioners ourselves and offer this to everyone else, knowing the power that it had. So now we do sessions on each other regularly to find answers in the mundane to answers in the mystical and the transcendental and everything in between.
You know that, well, listen to how we're speaking right now. There's a humanness to it. And when you listen to the transmission, there is such a depth, a density to how the higher self says what it needs to say, and it cuts through everything. And it is not the conscious mind, which may be so easy to understand, even as we were editing and putting out all the parts on our podcast, listening to things over and over again. There is still so much of it that can be grounded, that if you just meditated on one of the concepts that the higher self delivers and presents, can absolutely shatter everything that we thought about ourselves. The higher self talks of many concepts. We're not going to go through all of it because, well, what's the point of listening to it then? But there are major themes such as the awareness, and even knowing that the awareness behind the self isn't who we are, through to identity as a measure of separation from the all.
Which is mentioned a lot.
It is. It is. And going back even before I talk to more detail of the episode, but this is also how we discover more truth about ourselves. We go straight to source. We go to the part of ourselves that has the access to the infinite or the all, or it simply has more access than our conscious faculties can. And I know QHHT and going to the higher self, or whoever we've been able to channel through, has always provided that sense of peace. And from that state, you keep on saying it, even as you're editing, it's so obvious. What makes it so obvious in that state, receiving all of this?
I mean, the image I get goes back to a childhood video game called Mario Party on the Nintendo 64. And there was this deep sea divers one where there's different treasures that you can get the deeper you can dive. And the more we can get into stillness, and the more we can get ourselves into a resonance with our own higher self, our own subconscious, our own oversoul, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have a name. It's the field of the all itself that has its own direct channel to you as a part of all of reality itself. The more you can strengthen that connection, the deeper you can go into getting answers that are more and more, not only more profound, but they're also much more simple and obvious. Many people think the truth is going to be something that's really complex or can be reduced down to a math equation, and it sort of doesn't work like that.
It doesn't. And wisdom, isn't something out there or, can't reach it. Even that is not the right way to say it. It is all within, but even when, you hear it often, just go within, just this, or everything you need is within. Well, how do you get there? Because that's not something that we do easily. And, being on the path, especially who we were beforehand, that was the last place we existed.
Our egos just don't get any level of depth unless it's directed and channeled.
And even learning to trust what does come through in our conscious waking state. But if anything, shall this transmission elicit that curiosity in the listeners? Well, what could this experience be like for me if I was to go into that state? What could come through? Because I think you were saying it when we were at the Mind Body Spirit Festival, talking to people about QHHT, how many direct interactions or direct moments, that's not the right word to say it, do people have with their higher self?
Yeah, how many times in your life will you really have a chance to just sit there and get answers from your own higher self?
And the nature of identity, especially in conventional development, it's been flattened, for lack of a better word. Okay, now you want to be a XYZ, just think your way into it. But what is that foundationed on? What lies under all of these constructs that we are wearing as masks today as identity, that we can't just go and put on another set of clothes and call that our truth? There are limitations to that. That's the kind of exploration between survival and transcendence. What is happening here?
Yeah, well, we have to acknowledge the fact that we're multidimensional as well, because the thing is, if we're flat packing these sort of belief systems, we have to achieve higher paying job and live in a bigger house and drive a fancier car. These are to a deeper dimension of ourself. It's really a type of pathology. They're scripts that are running that are not serving the higher self. It's sort of keeping us in a loop. And so at this level, we play out these patterns that really, they're sort of a means to an end. They'll play their bit, but then say when we confront our own death, for example, as a human, what did all of that mean really? And this is where being able to go deep and work with the higher self is really where we can change those scripts. So not only can we still have those things in this world if we want them, but also make sure that they're serving a deeper, lasting purpose with what the soul, the higher self, really wants.
There is so much on offer in this transmission, and we also asked, what do people do when they're listening and they feel discombobulated, or this cannot simply be taken and put into a meme and flat packed for mass export? Breathe through this, revisit this as many times as you feel called to.
You forgot to pause and just say breathe.
And breathe.
It's the only answer, really.
That there is. If you love what you're listening to, we are more than open to your feedback and your thoughts. You're welcome to leave that in the comments below. And if there are any questions of curiosity that you would like us to pose to the higher self, when we will be producing more of these types of transmissions for the channel and the show, then please put that in the comments below.
We hope you enjoy the transmission.
What is identity actually made of, and how much of it exists independently of fear, memory, and narrative?
Identity means different things. To the different dimension you might say you're operating from. Does the all have an identity? Of course not. It's just everything. Yet when our souls are created, you might say, the first level of identity is created. where you change and move from the concept of I am to I am me. Identity itself. The stronger the identity, the stronger the degree of separation from the all. You might think fears, memories, and anything else. These really are just part of how the dimensions operate. You see, the universe you find yourself in has different rules at different levels. Everyone is ultimately, whether they know it or not, trying to find their way home back to the all. But this game is not intuitive like many people would assume. There are many reasons to thicken and harden your identity, or as we perceive it, your degree of separation from the all. That's really what identity is.
You mentioned dimensions and different, in reference to different dimensions of self. Not everyone may have awareness of what that is. Could you please explain that?
It's very simple. Look at yourself, and then look at the person next to you. Are you all part of one, or do you see separation? It's very simple, depending on the level you're operating from. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. If you look at another human, and you understand they have their own desires, they have their own free will, they have their own choices, then you are still operating from identity and separation. It's not bad. You might look at an evil-minded person you might construct and say they're not operating from the state of the all, they're in extreme separation. And typically they are. But look at the way that you react to them. You further reinforce that degree of separation. This is a very easy example, if you feel that satisfies.
People listening may also not be familiar with the concept or separation programming. They might be sitting there thinking, separate from what? I'm here, I'm all here. Could you speak to that?
You're here to experience, to become a fractal of the all. It's necessary to build identities, because what else is the all to do? To the average human mind, separation and unity are all part of the oneness. Separation programming, you can construct it as programming if you like, but reality is so infinite that it gets to be separate and one at the same time. It's like a strange loop. Concepts that you cannot logically make sense of. A is larger than B, B is larger than C, and then C is also larger than A. You can go into the science. Douglas Hofstadter and his work is great. But separation and unity are always both at play. You are the whole universe growing into your own fractal version of another universe. Do you see how you have to become separate to become yourself? But then yourself also becomes another all. This is the idea of holons and holarchy. You are nested. You are a complete being carrying the seed of infinity within you. And that even though you need to be separate to find that, it ultimately goes back into the all once again. So we don't necessarily subscribe to separation programming, because it's all part of the one greater unity.
Beautifully described, thank you. Why do humans mistake the voice in their head for the one who is living their life?
This goes back to separation versus unity. The voice in your head is you, and it both isn't you at the same time. These are different degrees of you and your being as you construct it. You come from the oneness, the everything nothingness of the all. You see, when you get back to separation versus unity, people get so bogged down in the identity of separation that they forget that there are so many moving parts to who and what their makeup is. How many people walk around as a human forgetting that you are made up of billions of cells and trillions of other living organisms inside of you, like bacteria? Did you ever think what their conscious experience is like?
No.
Are you one thing, or are you many things in unity? This is probably where your concept of separation programming is apt. It's just reinforced so hard that people don't know how to hold the balance. See, the challenge with duality is that people fall into one side versus another. And if you want to have a look at how that gets easily co-opted, look at politics and two opposing political parties. Why does it fall into two? People like binaries. Duality is very comfortable for the human perception. But to transcend it, you always need to find the balance between the two and go outside of it, or go above it, and understand that the reason that both sides even have followers is because there is a core truth that they are tapping into. But then often it fails to account for the other side, creating that separation. And again, that separation programming unconsciously forms. So the narrative in their head, it is them. But people have learned not to trust it. People have never learned to engage in a conversation as if it's a separate part of you. Or people just follow it blindly as if it is just them, without any degree of separation. Do you know anyone, yourself included, who has ever had a conversation with the voice inside your head?
I know Daniel does.
Daniel does all the time. Why do you think he loves philosophy and the exploration of mysticism? This isn't as weird as most people make out if they understood who and what they are. Understanding yourself can be it is the most liberating thing you can do. Because really connecting to the deeper, more intimate parts of yourself is ultimately how you get what you want out of every experience you could possibly have in and outside of life as you construct it.
Profound. Thank you. How much of what people call self is simply a rehearsed reaction to past pain and environmental pressure?
From a human perspective, today's, well, not just today's, depends on how much they fall into a reactive state, the monkey mind, survival instincts. You see, survival pressures and evolutionary pressures are at play. The pressure to survive, it is what keeps things like fear in check. Fear isn't just evil. It isn't just a bad thing. There's a real evolutionary need to help work in survival through fear. Yet at the same time, we have to balance that energy out. Again, it comes back to this duality. It's duality consciousness that underpins these questions. Being able to feel into the other side. So if you have survival pressures pushing you down, we also have evolutionary pressures needing us to rise up.
Could you elaborate on that last part a bit more?
The self, it's evolving. It's not just growing and changing, and it's not just trying to survive. It's about 1 foot in survival, 1 foot in evolution. And evolution is what demands our awareness. It's what demands our conscious focus and asserting and acting free will in ways that it hasn't been tested or explored before. And so for that reason, it often puts a direct pressure on survival as well, because to fall into survival can be great. You'll be comfortable. But then eventually things begin, like a tree that gets old. It starts to become stiff, rigid, dry, and then ultimately brittle. Memories and fears, they test our survival. But the thing is that these aren't just playing out you might look at childhood traumas or childhood fears. The monster under the bed. These are primordial. Look at the archetype of the dragon. It embodies multiple predators all in one. It's a flying snake that spits out fire. Really, video games and movies have done them a disservice, but they can represent the collection of fears from predators. Why do you think the myths all talk about slaying the dragon? Why do you think dragons hoard gold mythologically? You have to conquer your survival to get the gold. Slay the dragon to get that which you want. This is how you overcome the fears, and I know that's not your question. But the answer for every individual will be different. How much are they actually activating the interplay between survival and transcendence? That's the degree to which each individual in this world really is just a collection of their own stories, fears, and experiences. And so I can't give you an objective answer to that question because it's too variable.
Daniel mentioned the quote yesterday or a couple of days that survival is morality, but morality is not survival. Could you expand on that in the context of what you were speaking about survival and transcendence?
Let's consider the human chakras. Is it moral to survive? Do you have a right to survive? Do you believe you have a right to survive?
Yes.
I don't think many people are going to disagree with that answer. So in the first instance, survival is morality. But this is looking from a bottom-up approach, the root chakra. And you're working from survival. But when you're working from the top down, think the crown chakra. This is unity, this is connection to spirit. But it's really connection to all. It's not just spirit, it's your own self. Because your self is spirit. Then is just survival of yourself necessarily doing a service to the all?
No.
It can be. It might not be. There are many things humans do that is not in service to the planet, not in service to each other, and not in service to the parts of themselves. Look at the people who become addicts, or they become abusive, or even tragically commit suicide. Do you think they're doing that in service of the all? So on one hand, from the bottom up, we do have the right, and it is moral to have the will to survive. But that's also part of the construct of the identity, which is why going against survival instincts can be so difficult. Yet when we understand it from a more top-down approach, we understand that even survival is yet another construct of our identity. And therefore, it can or it cannot be moral. But if you transcend even that chakra system, even that is just, it doesn't hold form either. Morality is another construct of the identity. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. What happens to the idea of a core identity when language, memory, and belief are stripped away?
You're trying to put identity into a vacuum. It's exactly where identity goes to die. There is no survival without the constructs of the way we interpret ourselves. Language plays a bigger role in this than many people realize. If you've never studied another language, particularly one that's quite different from your own, then you can begin to see, particularly in the nuances, how even your perception is shaped through the words you use, which words you're not supposed to use. And even words that aren't even known by people, the lost words. Language is a tool. And so again, we posit that identity itself isn't inherently immoral. It's part of the all becoming the one so it can create itself again as the all, but still existing within the all. It's a strange loop. It's paradoxical. Even trying to hold this state and stay grounded is extremely difficult for Daniel right now. It's like trying to dance between two worlds. And so from time to time he does need that guidance as well, because this level of connection is very difficult for the human to even really hold. And Daniel's not as practiced as he needs to be to channel this fluently throughout his waking state.
Is there anything else you'd like to share on the idea of the core identity when language, memory, and belief are stripped away?
There's not a lot, but we encourage people to go study. You can study language itself, but studying a new language is a phenomenal way to learn. Does the subject come first, or does the object come first? Is it a gendered language, or is it not? Look at English, for example. It's like a Frankenstein language of Latin, and it's pieced together in ways that don't make sense. Even look at French. Blanca means white, yet it sounds like black. There's an inversion in the English language, for example, if that makes sense.
It does.
Languages are very complex, and even they're evolving too, but it's very slow. And so think of language as giving a container for you to build your identity, a sandbox you might think of it. Because it tells you what concepts are constructed through what words are given. If it's not given a word, trying to localize and ground a concept and experience a part of your identity, it becomes very slippery. Because we're always trying to find ways to bridge spirit with the material. And language is more often than not, it's a very good way to make sense of it. That's why you see poets. They know how to do that in a very elegant way that brings it. It's like sowing spirit through words, as opposed to just using more concrete and structured sentences the way most people do, to just impart information logically, as if they're just information packets. Even that, you might say it carries some degree of loss of the deeper spiritual domains independent of the words used. You see how even language itself is more than just the words or the structure and the syntax.
I think it was in a previous session where you said that each word is flat packed.
more often than not, people, again, it goes back to the survival. When people are working in the dualistic state of death versus life, survival is a very strong, it very much has the grips on the human mind. Daniel speaks about this astrologically. Saturn used to be the ruler of the solar system. It was the furthest out planet, the Lord of the Rings as they would call it. And we know Saturn to be a planet of structure, limitation, and discipline. Yet now the ruler of our solar system, astrologically speaking, is Pluto, because it is the furthest out planet. It's not even a planet if you go to the astronomers, but it still carries that resonance of the energy. It goes back to the mythology of Pluto, the Roman god of the underworld. Darkness, shadow, suppression. It rules Scorpio. This is the time of day, just after the sun sets, and all your fears come up. And now people don't even understand how Pluto rules through the fear of death, the fear of the darkness, the fear of what could happen through loss. And this grips people's minds in ways they haven't even consciously come to realize. Because really, people are still in this dualistic belief of there's a start at the beginning, and then there's birth at the beginning, and then there's death at the end, and it's a linear progression. Yet there's been enough allegories and enough myths. Look at the story of Jesus, who died on Good Friday and resurrected on Easter Sunday. Look at the story of the phoenix who dies and then gets born again from its ashes. Look at the story of Neo from The Matrix. He died at the end of the first movie and then was reborn as the One. These are all mythologies that understand inherently that to transcend the fear of darkness, you have to realize that death itself always gives way to rebirth. And this is no different from your identity either. Even the death of who you think you are. When you die, you'll be born anew. Just not in a way you might realize to start.
Why do humans trust their perception of reality when perception itself is distorted by bias, emotion, and expectation?
Perception isn't always distorted. Perception can become purified. Perception plays on survival. It must, but it also, again, it serves that dual purpose of also into evolution too. Now, just because something is a construct, it doesn't mean it's false. But what it does mean is that it's not absolutely true. It's only a relative truth. You might say that 1 + 1 = 2. That's not an absolute truth. It's a relative truth. Because 1 + 1 doesn't even exist You've made it up. 1 watt plus 1 watt. Perception itself, again, it ultimately comes into being able to identify and understand not only the microcosm, ourselves, our inner world, and how we perceive, but it's also, and where most people focus, is the macrocosm, the outside world. Looking at society, looking at the stars, looking at the universe. The thing with perception is that you have to balance your own inner awareness and perception with, and making sure that's actually refined and accurate, in the same way that you need to tune a telescope. Or even if you pull out your phone camera, the lens needs to adjust. Inner perception needs to get purified to be able to accurately assess and perceive the external world. And then at the same time, gathering data from the external world can allow us to then refine and work with our own internal faculties too. So it's about finding the balance rather than just assuming that perception is inherently flawed. But the thing with perception is that it's, depending on the level you work at, which is most of them, they'll only give you the relative truths. Going outside, going deeper, will get you access to deeper truths that are still relative. Because only the absolute truth is the only real truth, if you want to construct it like that. Does that make sense?
It does.
These are very difficult questions to answer simply, just in the nature of what they're attempting to do. Because this is a space where the typical human mind can't grasp and localize in a way that will suit what they're looking for. It won't reinforce their perception. They must. It is non-optional. They must expand their awareness. They must tune their inner faculties to be able to perceive more of reality itself. And they also need to get out there and explore more of the world so they can understand more of themselves too. If you sit at home and only watch the TV, how do you know that what's actually happening on the TV is the true reality? You don't. You can't. It's just not possible. And then for that reason, you can't really know yourself properly. Because you don't have enough reference points. That's why going out, experiencing, meeting people, traveling, all force you ultimately to refine yourself too. So it's an interplay. And tuning our perception to gain deeper levels of relative truths. And with enough perspective of the relative truths, we can ultimately begin to surrender all of that to become aware of the absolute truth.
Profound and discombobulating. Thank you. In what ways do people use logic, reason, ideals, and morality to avoid confronting the deeper unknown of who they really are?
Let's break down each one of them. Logic. Even logic and... what did you say the second one was?
Reason, ideals, and morality.
Reason and logic go hand in hand, although you can reason without logic. These are fairly straightforward. It's how you make sense of the world. How do you assert the rules? Logic follows a formula. When you do a mathematical equation, you expect the plus sign to mean the same thing no matter what the equation. Correct?
Correct.
Now, what if you needed to do more complicated mathematics equations and the plus didn't exist? The thing is, we're trying to find answers. We're trying to make sense. And so at a very simple level, even working with logic and reason, it's ways that help us navigate our own experiences. And this goes back to, again, perception and being able to purify it, because these can become very co-opted. If you've ever heard of the term a logical fallacy, it's one where logic is short-circuiting on itself. And so, a logical fallacy, you might think of the Nuremberg trials. I was only following orders. The logic there is that this goes into morality. This goes straight to the bigger picture of what you were getting at. But it targets the belief that following orders is inherently moral. And is it? These men, mostly, were tasked with killing, torturing, capturing, and enslaving their fellow man. It doesn't matter what flag you use, what belief you hold, as long as it's not rooted in harm. If someone tells you to do something in which you wouldn't want done to you, assuming you know what is good for you and what is not, then it does not make it moral. And so the logical fallacy there, it was an appeal to authority. And that is not true morally. Just because someone in power says to do something doesn't make it moral. Does that make sense?
It does.
So when it comes to using these tools, you might say, it goes back to purifying their perception. They're using internal, think of it like an internal map and compass. If you haven't purified that, then you're not going to understand the outer world properly. And if you haven't navigated the external world, you can't map out your own internal framework properly. It really is as simple as that. These things, although they go deep, the principles tend to remain the same if you haven't noticed the theme playing out. It's duality. duality is one of the biggest elements that's playing out in identity construction. This is where in the Hindu scriptures they speak to Advaita, or look at the Taoists and the Tao Te Ching. They speak to non-duality because you need both in balance to really know who you are. And people are too easily tilted one way or another, and they do not counterbalance exactly the opposite of that in which they become toxic in, or they become deficient in, or just imbalanced in any way. And that gets done through their own internal faculties, logic and reason, even ideals and morality itself. These are, projected external concepts that they still hold from their own internal state. And so it really just goes back to balancing the duality of that whichever they have a problem with. Be it small, be it large, be it internal, be it external. How many people might have a terrible job where they hate their boss, but fail to account that that hate is actually stewing within them? And so they've actually gone into an energetic resonance to be able to tolerate that horrible boss. They've changed their own internal compass, their resonance really, to be able to handle this energy and stay within it. Where if they radiated their light, they maintained a powerful connection to themselves, one of two things would happen. That boss would have to leave, or you'd have to leave. Does that make sense?
It does.
Always balance the internal and the external. They create that feedback loop in which you can drive things deeper to know yourself. And without that, your logic, your reasoning, your ideals, and your morals will always be smaller than the larger relative truths.
I can see how that would be confronting to many, and many examples came up. And we're going to move to the next question. What lies are embedded in language itself that keeps humans locked into a limited sense of self?
It's not that language carries lies. See, this is another. Even these questions are already dualistic, and they're already capturing the listener's perception into a certain way of thinking. Some might resonate very well with hearing the question, not realizing again that their own internal logic and reasoning isn't calibrated correctly. This is a really good question to call it out. Language is a tool, and it is a construct. It doesn't necessarily include lies or deceptions. It can, though. But this gets deeper than what this session can cover. And it goes more into the vibrational resonance that even the spoken word carries. This is something that you could speak to in the future, but sound, shapes, they carry their own frequency and resonance. And so understanding that if the meaning is in accurate resonance, imagine you had a word like harm, but you gave it a sound that was very pleasant. Do you see how that would distort people's perceptions around the concept of harm?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other words that you could make very harsh and unpalatable. And that changes our perception too, because there are other elements at play with interpreting language outside of, again, it's just the words or just the semantics or the syntax. There's more going on with the way language is interpreted too. But the level that this needs to go is outside of the scope of this session, but understanding resonance and frequency will be key to understanding how language can carry lies within it, not through direct lies, but think of it as it's more like drift. It's moving away from what it actually connects with, and it takes more energy for the human to bridge that gap, to hold that word means that concept, or that sentence holds that energy and intention. That's all we have to say on this one.
Thank you. Why do people hold on to beliefs they didn't choose, as if those beliefs were sacred truths about reality or themselves?
There are many reasons for this one. Like what we said about purifying your perception, how many people even know that they can cleanse their own perception? How many people take who they've been constructed as and who they chose to construct themselves and continue to choose to for granted? Do you know people in your life who were just given their life to them? This is who you'll be. This is a job that's good enough for you. And this is who I am now. There's degrees to this, but there are many people in this world who fall into the life that they were given. And there are many reasons for that as well. It's not just, this goes back to duality. When you mention beliefs that weren't theirs, well, they became theirs. If someone gave them the belief, they also had to energetically accept it. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does.
And so the reason why they can't let things go is because they don't know how they first come to accept it or to hold on to it. Because to accept it is to hold on to something. And so that paired with an imbalance of survival versus evolution. And it's also part external exploration to then refine and recalibrate their own internal faculties. It's many moving parts all at once. But really you might call this unconsciousness in a more deeper sense. In the same way that if you think of a human who is unconscious, they are usually eyes closed and not aware of what's happening. This happens at deeper levels as well. And so this is part of the identity that gets formed when you shut down, when you act out of fear and survival and in duality and not in evolution. Again, it goes back to duality, but it also has an element of free will, because again, imagine two children growing up in an abusive household. One of them fights every step of the way and then vows to never become what their parents were. And then the other child struggles and struggles with anxiety, depression, loneliness, addiction, anything and everything. And then they go on to become an abuser too. Do you think they actively chose and said, this is what I want to become?
No.
It's a case of falling into it because they don't know how they accepted it. They've become unconscious of their deeper inner faculties, and they've also typically lacked enough external experience or support to be able to activate their free will to behave differently. Where other souls, like that first child, might come in strong enough to know and to continue to hold the gnosis that they can choose different, and they do.
Before I go on to the questions, listeners may be thinking, who is we? Because it is I who is speaking. So can you clarify the reference of we, especially when people may not be familiar with channeled work or being in a trance state?
We include the parts of Daniel, the parts connected to the quantum field, where we become less individual humans and more one collective mind. You might know this through Carl Jung's collective unconscious and the way there are elements playing out. Most people are not connected to the collective. The collective has its own awareness and its own experience, even though it doesn't have a body as you perceive it, not on the 3D plane. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you for the clarification. How has the illusion of being the observer become the final mask behind which the ego hides?
It's the first degree of separation. You observe that you are a you. Before we mentioned, the all is I am. It has no reference. It has no distinction of separation. It just is what it is. But then the first degree of separation happens. And then you say, I am me. And so it's the observer that has the awareness that it can perceive itself. And so that's the first of the layers of separation. but it's not the absolute truth. The absolute truth is beyond observing yourself. It is just being, just I am. And so you might think that those that get trapped in the observer are 1 degree of separation from the absolute truth. Does that answer your question?
It does. If people are listening to this and feeling discombobulated and disorientated with all of this, what should they do?
Breathe.
To what extent is the personality just a camouflage system designed not to express truth, but to gain safety and approval?
This goes back to the duality, survival versus evolution. The identity is necessary because it's part of constructing your separation to both birth. It's a process of birthing and then becoming the all again. So it's tricky to answer, is it just a mask? It can be if it's false. But if someone wears, think of a masquerade, just because they're wearing a mask, does it not mean that there is a human, not a human behind that mask, and a soul behind that human? They're just layers. The framing of these questions, once again, it fails to account the necessity for the sake of the game, the eternal game of separation and unity. It's not always about hiding. It's not always about putting up a front. It's also about learning to become who you are as well. Because if you can't play a game of identity and a game of wearing masks, how can you know who you are? Again, this goes back to the balance between calibrating your inner and external, your inner and outer worlds. Think of the teenager who does their hair differently, and the parents say, oh, it's just a fad. Think of how dismissive that is in the need for that individual, that teen, to find their own independence and find their own sense of identity rooted in independence. Yeah, it might be silly. Yeah, it might look foolish. But at the same time, there's a deeper part, and they're trying to find their place, both individually and within the world. And this is deeper work than people can tend to give credit for. But you'll see those who don't explore, those who don't suspend their own position, and those who don't even loosen up their own sense of identity, falling into wearing the same masks and falling into the false version of themselves, which is, again, like that analogy of the tree we gave before. It becomes dry and then brittle. Ultimately, it goes brittle and then it dies. The essence of being alive, the essence of knowing who we are and being in union with every dimension of our being, is one that's always exploring, one that's always playing with masks and identities, because it also knows that that's how you return to the all as well. You can't go backwards. You can't choose to grow younger. Everything is moving, and in a sense, in the human sense, everything is moving forward. And so the need to grow and evolve is, again, that pressure and not falling into just survival. There are some identities, you go to some countries, there are some identities that will get you killed. So you have to be careful, and that's where survival is at play. Again, it's the balance, it's the interplay. But playing with identities, wearing masks, isn't inherently bad. But being able to, again, balance is key.
How come some people are so convinced that the mask is them? They are full, they are content with who they think they are.
They fell into duality. They fell into unconsciousness of deeper inner layers of their being. And they continue to assert that onto and project that onto the external world. This is the thing with projection. When you hold a powerful internal state and refuse to budge, you'll start to see projection. And so, again, it's like that tree. It's become unmoving, unbending. And it's like, it's not like a callus per se. It can be. It protects their survival. But at the same time, you have to face the same abrasion, the same stress on that part of the body to develop a callus. If you found a new way to deal with it, you wouldn't need to have a callus. There are deeper layers of people's being, and they have become, for one reason or another, fear, stress, trauma, all of these, they get lodged and embedded deep within their inner realms. And then they lose sight of how that happened. And then they act it out and project it.
Why is it so terrifying then for humans to imagine a life with an identity without a defined me to anchor their experiences?
Because what you're describing here is death. Death in the way they perceive it. If I am not here, then I am dead. That's all it is. And the fear of death has gripped them. These people have fallen into duality of the concept of death and life itself. You can be breathing, paying taxes, eating dinner, living a life as you might call it, and be dead. You might be a disembodied spirit that is full of the essence of life. Whether you have a heartbeat is not always a defining factor as to whether you're truly alive. And because most people have never played with the concept of life and death and what it actually is, how do most people perceive death? You perceive an old person, or maybe someone tragically who was hit by a car, and you just think it's the end. They no longer exist. They got deleted from the game of this world. It's a construct. Even them, their identity is a construct of the all. And we understand that that's a very radical thing to say. It's beyond the, I don't want to say the comprehension, but the integration to those on the path that are not very far along. Because mortality, we understand, still has grips, a very strong grip on the human race. But this is where we invite you to connect with the energy of Pluto. Death and rebirth are the same thing. When you eat your food, do you mourn the death of whatever that meal was? It changed form. So then even think of yourself. Before you were in this body. Now we know this gets a little bit complicated to describe if the passage of souls into this world is not understood. A good place to start is the veil of forgetfulness. There really isn't a death as an end in the way you think of it. This is where the tarot gets it correct. Death isn't the end. It might be the end of the physical form, but you experiencing yourself doesn't die when your vessel expires. So overcoming the shadow that has been built around the concept of death really is necessary if you are to understand the idea that people have, the fear that they have of reality existing without them in it.
How do people examine their relationship with death?
That is different for every individual.
Mm-hmm.
You might just sit there and just ask, what does it mean to be alive right now? Because people put so much energy on death that they don't know what it means to be alive. So give the other half of that equation a chance to have its say. That might be a good place to start.
Thank you. What is the most dangerous assumption humans make about who they are? And why is it so hard then to let it die?
Thinking you have the answers. Believing you have the answers. Thinking that truth. Thinking that there is more than one truth, which is the absolute truth. Everything else is a construct, and it might be a functional construct. These are relative truths. 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 does not equal 3. The logic of that does not work. But the truth is that 1 + 1 = 3 exists as an equation because we just made it an equation. The truth has deeper and deeper layers to it, but it is still in the realm. It is still in the realm of being constructed through relative truths, because reality itself as you understand it through your perception is constructed. Does that make sense?
It does.
You can play a video game and understand the mechanics of it perfectly, but then those mechanics no longer apply the moment you turn the console off. The moment you leave the material plane, the rules and the logic of that no longer necessarily apply. Now you'll play many video games that share a similar logic and physics to this dimension, but that's not necessarily how higher ones work. But then ultimately, once you get past that first illusion of that you are the observer, and understand that really that's a construct of the all, understanding where the journey starts and the journey ends is a construct. It's not the truth. There is no beginning and there is no end. Thinking you understand the whole picture when you are separate from the all, it can only yield, you might think of a degree of truth, but it's not the truth. There is only one truth, and it is infinite and it is eternal. And it is everything all at once, outside of any perception or identity. That is what you might construct as God. Not someone who rules, controls, created you. The all did create you, but you created yourself as the all. So then really, do you see how tricky it is to localize? There are so many ways to answer this question, but given the nature of this podcast, truth is a very, very apt place to answer that question. People think they know the truth. They know a truth, or they know sets of truths, but they are not the absolute truth.
Based on all of the questions, is there any final reflection you would like to share?
Don't let this dissuade you. If you're on the path, keep going. It's all part of the journey. You are here to find your way home, but home isn't anywhere but right here. There are parts of you, there are parts of the universe that you too have fallen unconscious to, but you are always in communion with them because you are part of the same all that is everything else. Every time you see someone you dislike, every time someone cuts you off in traffic, every time someone makes you smile, and just feel that bit of gratitude, understand at some level you are allowing this to happen and creating it for yourself. But the totality of reality relative to the limited human waking perception is so tiny. It is insignificant. If you can grow your own awareness to a larger state, we call this evolution, we call this maturity, we call this embodiment, we call this soul integration. It doesn't matter what you call it, but it's moving back towards the all. The journey of the human life, one of the journeys we love to construct, is to fall into separation from birth and then to reclaim divine union with the all. Stay on the path, but make sure you're balancing your inner and outer worlds. Make sure you're balancing the dualities, say between serious and fun, work and rest, being social and being in solitude, and the other dimensions, whatever you find yourself doing too much of. Always find a way to counterbalance. Because it's a part that isn't spoken to enough. Everyone thinks they can give you the answer. The anything is very dangerous. Because we are all far too individuated, and that's the way it's meant to be. To all adhere to the answer from someone else. The answer can only come from your own connection to the all.